Hello guys, and welcome to a new episode in the On Cloud video series, where I'll be discussing various topics from the DevOps world. My name is Andrei Petrescu, and I lead the DevOps department at CloudHero. In today's episode, we are going to discuss about the most difficult migration that I've ever had to do. And it wasn't the most difficult because of the application architecture, but because of all the factors that compounded. Throughout the video, I will describe the main three challenges that I've had to face, but before that, I'll give you a brief summary of how the platform looked like from an architecture perspective. There were four main components in the application. We had the file servers, which hosted the video and the audio files. We had the PHP applications, which also served the web as well as the API. We had the databases, and then we had a server which was doing video encoding and audio encoding. But without further ado, let's go to the first challenge. I only had 1 year of experience and there was nobody else to help me. When I said that there was nobody else to help me, I am exaggerating a little bit, because there was nobody from the development side, but there was my colleague Andrei, who took care of the platform from an operations point of view. But even if he worked on it for many years, he didn't have the knowledge of how the user flows look into the code. So what I had to do, using my programming language experience from university, was try to do what a typical user would do and then look into the PHP code. So let's say, for example, I moved a part of the application. Then I would try to upload a video. I would get an error. So what would I do? I would copy the error, I would search for it in the code, and then find the function that was doing the video uploading. I then looked at what would that function do. And when I got a basic understanding of that, I would just fix it or install what was missing and so on and so forth. One very interesting story from the digging of how the application works was regarding the view increment on the videos. So one of the last pieces of the puzzle when I finished the migration, everything worked fine, the platform worked fine, but when I would look into the videos, I would watch the videos, I would see that the views wouldn't increment. So it was pretty bad from a user experience point of view, because you can imagine you upload the video and then you see that nobody is watching it. You would think that something is wrong. And what actually was the problem was that there was a script on the physical server that MySQL was running on, and that was doing the video incrementing. So this is one example of what happens when you don't document your application. Challenge number 2, the systems were super outdated. And I don't exaggerate when I say that they were super outdated. They were so outdated that when I was trying to create the destination servers, the platform didn't have the operating system that were on the source servers. Fortunately, there are parts of the system which were very old weren't used anymore. So for example, the streaming part of the website was not used anymore, but there was one server which was still being used, and that was the encoding server. So I had to read like tens or hundreds of lines of bash code to try to understand how everything worked, and then I built a Docker container with FFmpeg on it, and then copied the bash scripts and somehow made it work. I still have the notes on Evernote on my laptop from those days about how I built the containers. Challenge number 3. After finishing the migration, there was still one last piece of the puzzle that was not working. When I was accessing the main web page, in the top right corner, I would see a button that would say blog, which is pretty weird because while doing the initial audit, I didn't see any mentions of any blog on the reverse proxies. So what I did was I looked at the HTML code and then I saw the URL that the blog was running on. I did a dig on that URL and then I saw that the IP resolved to an AWS IP, which was pretty weird for me because I didn't even know that the platform had an AWS account. Luckily, my colleague Andrei had the account for AWS, but the problem was that nobody had SSH access into the server that was running the blog. So what do you do when you don't have SSH access into a server on AWS? Well, at least a takeaway from this video is that on AWS, if you don't have SSH access anymore, you can detach the root disk from the VM, you can attach it into another VM, and then mount it into something like /data, modify the authorized keys file, and then mount it back in. And after that, you'll have access. After I SSH into the machine, I saw that there were some Docker containers running the blog. I don't remember exactly what I did, but I think a restart fixed everything. So that was the last piece of the puzzle. Now that we've talked about all the big challenges, I'm going to do a short recap of how the migration went from start to finish. So, the source servers, some of them had KVM installed. So the first step was to install KVM on the destination as well. We took a snapshot of the virtual machines from the source data center and then moved them to the destination data centers. And I would say that about 60% of all the components were in virtual machines. So now that we went through the three main challenges of the migration, I want to give you a short recap of how it went from start to finish. The first thing that we did was install KVM on the destination, as it was also on the source. So about 60% of the servers from the platform were on virtual machines. And the biggest component that was on the virtual machine were actually the PHP FPM servers. So that was pretty seamless. The first thing we had to move were the virtual machines that were running on KVM. Fortunately, about 60% of the servers were virtual machines, so we just did a snapshot and then moved the snapshots and then restored them at the destination. Some of the servers that were on virtual machines were, for example, the PHP FPM VMs. And it was pretty easy to move them, we just recreated them, and then when we started them up, we saw that it was working. The second set of servers that we had to move were the file servers. The file servers were basically a set of Nginx servers that were hosting video and audio files with a very complicated configuration file. I think we can consider this the fourth biggest challenge of the migration, the fact that we had to move terabytes of data. I remember when we started the migration, we ran rsync for about 2 weeks just to move all the video files, because it was like 10 terabytes of files. And you couldn't randomly put files from one file server to the other, because the paths to the videos were stored in the database. So if you put one file from, let's say, the first file server to the second one, then you would get an error in the website. The third component was the encoder that I've already talked about, is that I've containerized it. And the fourth component that we're going to talk about is the databases. The platform was using two main databases. It was using MongoDB and it was using MySQL. For MongoDB, it was pretty simple because the data set was small, so we could afford a small downtime window. We just took a dump and then we restored it at the destination. For MySQL, as it was the heart of the platform, it wasn't so easy. So basically we've had to do a primary-secondary replication across the two data centers, and then when the moment to finally switch the endpoints to the DNS came, we just cut the cord and did the switch. That's a wrap for today. Thank you so much for watching, and if you like this video, please consider subscribing to the CloudHero YouTube channel. My name is Andrei Petrescu, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.